This podcast is for entertainment and storytelling purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice. Some topics may be sensitive. Please listen with care and seek support if needed. Welcome back to the Because She's Adopted podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Park. If you're new here, this is the podcast where we blame everything on being adopted. Just kidding. Hello and welcome back to the Because She's Adopted podcast. Today's guest is newly retired and taking to social media to ask, who cares? She believes it's time to spill the tea about experiences and lack of government accountability in British Columbia and Canada. I'll let her explain more. But first, I'd like to welcome her to the Because She's Adopted podcast. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks so much, Crystal. It's great to be here with you on this snowy morning in Qualicum Beach.
It's snowy here as well. All right, so let's get right into it. Catherine, you are an adoptee, yes?
I am. Yes, I am. I was adopted, and when I was born, I was born at Vancouver General Hospital, actually. And I was placed into care immediately, and I was adopted. My adoption was finalized just about 2 years later. And I was placed in a home in Vancouver, BC. And it was myself, my adopted parents, and my older brother, who was 2 years older than me. And I stayed with that family for just over 10 years. And at 12, the adoption broke down, and I was apprehended and placed back into government care in the Lower Mainland.
Okay. And then what did life look like after that?
What did it look like after that? I think that's a long journey. I would have to say that it was quite the shock for me. I went from my family, as you say, where I had grown up and didn't recall anything different, immediately into a group home, and that group home at 12 years of age was quite a shock for me. Lots of kids. There was about 8 of us there, and those kids didn't go to school. And those kids weren't allowed to even be in the house during school hours, so they were kicked out every day, whether or not they were going to school. And it was kind of an exciting but scary environment for me, given where I had grown up thus far. So things happened, lots of things happened. Kids didn't have some of the things that I had, so my belongings were stolen. I was introduced to smoking, skipping school, as I said. And the most shocking part for little old Kathy was they all swore, and I'd never been allowed to swear.
How incredibly traumatic that is to be apprehended and have to go sleep somewhere that isn't your bed in your home, unfamiliar.
Frankly, Crystal, it's when I reflect, and it's only been in the last, 5 to 10 years that I've really thought more about it. But I remember the experience vividly. I remember our kitchen table where we were all seated for dinner. And I remember feeling like I was being kidnapped.
Mm.
And what really led me to that feeling was the garbage bags. Always the garbage bags, right? For kids in care, everything is thrown into garbage bags. You're removed with garbage bags, your belongings stuffed into garbage bags as fast as you can. And so if there hadn't been a police officer there, which there was, I truly would have believed that I was being kidnapped. I'd been brought up to have faith in police and to believe that police were safe people. So that did give me some comfort, but that was my initial thought, was that I was being taken captive.
Wow. All right. Okay, so there's something very unique about your experience as an adoptee that I just wanted to touch on, was your adoptive parents. Can you tell us about them?
Sure, I can. Married, living in Vancouver. My adopted dad worked at UBC, and my adopted mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was caring for their biological son, my older brother, who's 2 years older than me. And the thing that really made my adoptive parents stand out is they were both people with dwarfism. And that brought a whole array of situations into our lives, both for them and for my brother and I. And some of them were great, and some of them were not so great. There was situations where we were both teased. I didn't look like my adopted family at all. I was a very fair-haired, brown-eyed child, and my brother and my parents were very dark-haired, and we didn't have any resemblance. So people made assumptions, and those assumptions most of the time were correct. That I was adopted, and so people had a lot of opinions around whether or not, and still do today, whether or not they should have been allowed to adopt me. And of course, I think that that brought a lot of tension into our family, and difficult for both my brother and I to understand. We knew we were different. We always knew we were different no matter where we went. My parents were looked at. We were looked at. Kids, kids would ask innocent questions like, "Why? Why are you so short?" And my dad would always say, "Because he didn't eat his vegetables." And that really got people laughing. It might have caused a little veggie trauma, but at least they were eating them, right? So it brought a lot of things into the family that created difficulty and complications for all of us, including, of course, my parents who had
Mm-hmm.
to live with the condition.
So, to clarify, you do not have dwarfism.
No,
No.
and neither does my brother.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
no, it's
So,
not genetic. It's not genetic.
so looking at, and we'll get into it more because you've worked within the system. Obviously, we don't want to discriminate against adoptive parents and assume that they, can or cannot care for a child based on, um, their abilities or the fact that they have dwarfism. What are your thoughts now?
It's really complicated, right? And what do I have to compare it to?
Mm-hmm.
So, what I can tell you is that through my search to find my biological parents, which I truly believed, I started very young searching. I truly believed that I was going to find my real family, what I called my real family, through that search. And when I met my biological parents, the exact opposite happened. When I first met my biological mom and spent some time, and I sat down with my adoptive parents, what I said to them was, "I've discovered who my real family is, who I believe my real family is." And it was them. It was them. They gave me the values, they gave me the opportunities that I never would have had with my biological family. Does that make up for the lack of the feelings of not belonging, being different, not fitting with my adoptive family? No, it doesn't. It doesn't erase any of that. Um, but it showed me where my bond was, where my attachment was. And it wasn't with my biological mom. And perhaps had my biological family situation been different, I might have had more resentment about being given up for adoption. But I I learned things and witnessed things and observed things that made me feel gratitude for the
Mm.
fact that I had been raised in my adopted family. And I know gratitude's a loaded word. Um, very much so. Should I have had to feel gratitude? No, but I didn't know any better. That's what I knew. I knew that I was safer. I felt like I had been safer in my adoptive home than I would have been in in my biological family. My mom was 13 when she got pregnant, and she had been 14 for just a month, almost a month before she had me. And my father was 16, and she wasn't given an option by her parents. There were no
Mm.
options discussed. My granny, who's still alive actually,
Wow.
who at 57 can say they still have their granny. I do. My biological granny was a nurse, and so she kept my mom at home,
Mm.
and she went with my mom when I was born to Vancouver General Hospital. And one of the things that has really meant the world to me, and I only found out about, gosh, 5 years ago now, is I was sitting with my granny, and we were talking, and I said, one of the things that really upsets me is about it all is that my mom said she never held me. Like, she didn't touch me, she didn't
Mm.
hold me. There was nothing. And in fact, she told them to get me away from her, and she was very open about that. And my granny said, "Oh, I held you. I held you." And just knowing that, just, I don't know, it means, it's hard to describe, but it means so much to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you were speaking before, just about your adoptive family and then your birth family, I relate to that. I feel myself too that my adoptive family was a safer place for me to be, not without, dysfunction and issues and all of that. But I think this idea that, oh, you're adopted, you're given a better life, but I don't even subscribe necessarily to that language anymore. It would definitely be a different life. And
Different.
different. It
Exactly.
would have just been a different life. Okay, let's skip ahead because I am so interested in the work that you're doing right now. You've just retired. Congratulations. Can you tell us
Thanks.
about what you did for work all of these years?
Sure, happy to. I've spent the last 30 years, just over 30 years, working in the child and youth welfare sector in a variety of capacities. I started my career off by founding an organization by the name of Now Canada. It's actually based in Kelowna. And I knew at 17 years of age, I just had this belief that one day I was going to create a safe home for kids that were street involved, kids that were homeless, and kids that were involved in human trafficking. And that was my goal. And at 26, I founded Now Canada, and my dream was one house, 5 beds. And over 7 years, we grew to over 160 beds, a school, equine therapy, second stage housing, apartment buildings, opening up BC's first mom and kid home for moms with babes that weren't able to have them. They were deemed a protection risk unless they were living in one of our houses. Um, so it was a real endeavor, and I felt like it was a child of mine. It grew very, very quickly, and helped thousands of women in and from BC, and primarily in the Kelowna area. We had the first homeless women's shelter, um, Alexander Gardner Women and Children Safe Center for mums and kids. Again, a 30 bed facility. So that's where my career began. And from there, I went into the homeless sector with BC Housing. And I spent 7 years on the downtown east side leading an interdisciplinary team of addiction counselors, nurses, psychiatric nurses, social workers, property managers, support workers in the original 1,400 units of single room occupancy hotel housing that BC Housing bought. Very difficult, very challenging environment, housing youth and adults in the downtown east side. And from there, I was asked to go and work on reserve on the Musqueam Reserve in Vancouver. It was something that really interested me. And Musqueam was very used to people making soft commitments to coming. And then when you realize the reality in the community, people would leave. So I was seconded from BC Housing originally, but I could see and feel that the community just wasn't buying into the relationship and what I wanted to do for children and youth in that community, and what I wanted to hear from them in terms of what they wanted. So I left BC Housing and went on contract on reserve. From there, I went into the anti-violence sector, so BC Society of Transition Houses. In Vancouver, it's an umbrella organization that oversees all of the transition houses in BC for women and children fleeing violence. And then from there, I was asked to join the provincial government in the role of Provincial Office of Domestic Violence, the lead role there as executive director, to take on the responsibility for the province's response to domestic violence in British Columbia. And then from there, I was asked to join the other side of the Ministry of Children and Family Development, where they were looking at prevention and family supports, transition supports for youth aging out of care, kinship caregivers, and I retired from youth justice. So I spent 3 years actually in youth justice, working strategically on how we respond to young people involved in the criminal justice system in BC.
Wow. You have done so much. Why did you take to social media now that you're retired? Why? What are you wanting to say? What are you wanting to get out there? And what change are you hoping to make? Those are a lot of questions, but I'm sure you'll start at the beginning for me.
So I've always, for the most part, I've shied away from social media. Working in government, there's a sense of oppression in terms of not having your voice and towing the line, the political line. And I found that incredibly challenging. My career goal had been to finish in the Ministry of Children and Families, because I knew if I'd gone to the ministry in my 20s, I'd have burned the place down after what I experienced in government care. So I knew I wanted to go on the inside. I hadn't anticipated 10 years of it, but 10 years of it was. And it was intentional. So I accept full responsibility for that. But I was always very much aware of the oppression and not having my voice. And yet at the same time, I was given a lot of leeway. I called things out. I truth talked. There's things I refused to do, which isn't typical in government. I have a funny saying, and it's you hold your nose and you do it anyway. But I was given a lot of leeway because I was not shy about saying that the system had raised me. And I think that made people a little uncomfortable. And I felt good about that. I wanted people to be uncomfortable. I wanted people to think about the best interests of children, not the best interests of the budget. And I say that knowing we have to be reasonable. You know, the ministry spends, it's public information, in excess of $2 billion a year on children and family services in BC with very poor results. So through retiring, I wanted my voice back. That was the number one thing. At my retirement party, I actually said they had a beautiful party for me, and I was very honored. But I said, here I go. I'm leaving the ministry again. I'm aging out again. This time I get a pension. At 19, I got my garbage bags and nothing else. But
Oh,
at
wow.
57, I get a pension, or a 10-year pension. It felt like being in bed with the devil I knew, and that I needed to use the opportunity, which was so surreal, to create as much change as I possibly could, and to create awareness of what the ministry's impact is, because I didn't witness that understanding in the ministry. We never talked in 10 years in the ministry. Not a single person, social worker, assistant deputy minister, youth worker, not once talked about the experience of apprehending a child. And that's what the ministry was set up to do in the 1950s, and that's what it's still doing. It's taking children and isolating them from their family. Really good people in MCFD, really good, caring people, but they're in a machine that has been built to do one thing. It's continuing to do it. It's continuing to do many other things, such as children and youth with support needs programming. Again, still with limited success. And nobody takes a look at the structure. We put Band-Aids on, we react to a tragic event, and we change policy, or we update a framework, or we change practice through policy, or legislation sometimes. But we never stop and look at what would it take? What would it take to make this system effective? And I'm going to oversimplify it, but one thought I have had always is, what if the mom or the dad, or the mom and dad and the siblings, what if the family came into care? What if the family had some autonomy in terms of what happened to them? If an adoption's breaking down, let's put some wraparound supports into that family and help them heal. We don't do that. And that adds to the breakdown and the level of breakdown that occurs. One of the things that really worried me, and bless my staff, I had the most amazing team. They're carrying on through what they called my legacy, is, for goodness sakes, we don't track how many adoptions break down each year. The ministry doesn't know how many adoptions break down and kids are returned to care. That's important, because that data, that information will tell us, are we being successful when we're placing kids? Are more supports needed? Are less supports needed? How do we ensure that the supports we provide are actually supportive and not punitive? All of those reasons are why I'm going to social media. I want the public to be aware. I want awareness. I want the public to understand what goes on in the ministry, because these kids are invisible. Nobody is aware of what happens to these kids. People don't know that 500 kids go missing, go what's called AWOL, absent without leave. They run away. 500 of them every single year.
Hang on a second. 500 children are going missing every single year here in BC?
Correct.
500 children.
500 children that run away, that go AWOL, that take off. And my question is always, what are they running away from? And what are they running to? What's going on? 500. And nobody talks about them. Do you know that in BC, there are very few elementary schools that have over 500 kids enrolled? What would we be talking about if an entire population of one school went missing every year? What would that conversation look like? So that's why I want awareness, and I want conversation, and I want to solution with people. I don't have all the answers. I'm one human being with some experience that I'll bring to the table over and over and over again until we can start to see a difference in the way families and children are treated in BC.
Are you talking about infant adoptions, or are you talking about foster care, children adopted out of foster care?
So my question back to you, Crystal, why does it matter? If an adoption is breaking down with an 8-month-old or an 8-year-old or an 18-year-old, why does it matter? It's a
Yeah,
child.
it doesn't. It doesn't. I think a lot of the adoptees that I'm in community with and listeners are not adoptees from foster care, but
Right,
it was purely curiosity.
right. Okay. So from my perspective, I believe that government has a responsibility and an accountability around how it supports kids that are adopted through any of the three ways you can be adopted: privately, through an agency, or through foster care. I believe that if any of those adoptions break down, the only route for the child is to be taken into care.
Hmm.
So what's a better, different response? We know that the worst outcomes happen when a child is raised in care. The worst possible outcomes: 200 times more likely to become homeless, 50 times more likely to suffer from a mental health admission into hospital, 5 times more likely to die before their 25th birthday compared with their non-child welfare experience peers. So any adoption at any point that breaks down, what's the response? And why would the first line of response be to remove the child? Maybe there's good reason. There's always going to be children that need to come into care, but maybe there's just supports that are needed. The number one reason for apprehension is neglect, and neglect is a cloak for poverty. So, what if it's a poverty issue? Why can't we wrap around that family and sustain that family for the betterment of the child and the family and the outcomes for that child and family? So, I believe that data tells a story. I know that data tells a story. I used it to change programs in the ministry, and that data will help the ministry to understand what's happening early on in adoption, where the supports like post adoption assistance are helping, and where they may be a shortfall. And maybe it's not post adoption assistance, maybe it's support, maybe it's education, maybe it's counseling, maybe it's life skills, maybe it's respite. Each family is the expert on what they need if we just talk to them. But we don't even know when a child is brought into care if they were adopted. So we don't
Wow.
have a starting place.
Are there more supports for foster parents if they do not adopt their foster child?
Yes. The straight up answer is yes. Um, Post adoption assistance is income tested. Um, if you are fostering children, you are not income tested. It's treated more as a caregiver, employment type situation. However, let's be very clear that foster parents also fight for every single support. Kinship caregivers fight for every single support that they get, and often feel like they cannot access or push for the services they need out of fear of the child being removed. And
Hmm.
those are the kinds of things that are said at times to families. If you can't manage this child, we will take this child into care. That is not in the best interest of the child most of the time. So experience with the ministry and experience with the system is one of fear. It's fear based. It needs to be, in my view, it needs to be one of support. How do we interact with keeping families together? How do we ensure that families have the supports that they need? And again, I recognize there isn't an infinite pot of money, but my goodness, over $2 billion. That's That's more money than I can count. It's a lot, an awful lot of money.
You've talked about the neglect as a cloak for poverty. And one thing you
Mm-hmm.
said that stuck with me was if a child is hungry, most likely the mother is hungry or the parents are hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of family preservation and supporting the family as a unit. And I've worked in the treatment centers. I went to a treatment center myself. A lot of the women have had their children apprehended, and then they go to a treatment center. And most, in my experience, from what I've seen, having their children apprehended isn't a wake up call to get well, because they are in such despair that they need to cope with the level of despair that they're in. And so then it just seems to spiral these women. I mean, I can't imagine being without my child. I cannot.
Yeah,
I
me
I
either.
cannot. So, talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I told my kids, I might get called out on this by somebody, but oh well, I'm retired. Um, I used to tell my kids if anything goes terribly, terribly wrong, just so you know, you're going to be on a deserted island with yours truly until we get it sorted out. And the only way off is you're going for a real long swim. Um, because I needed to break. I needed to break the cycle in my family. I needed to break the generational cycle of child welfare involvement in my family. So I'm going to just take you on a little journey, and we're going to talk about Sarah and Johnny. Sarah's 22 years old. She um, she spent some time in care, and all hypothetical. She spent some time in care. She had baby Johnny at 21. Her baby's daddy has come around a few times. They've got into it. There's been some arguing, some yelling, some things being thrown around. The neighbor calls the ministry and makes a child protection complaint. The ministry scales it, so it's triaged based upon what's going on. There's a 1 year old, Johnny's one. There's a 1 year old in that home. Lots of noise, things being smashed. That's pretty high in terms of a need for further investigation. um, the neighbor is saying that this is a fairly regular occurrence. That ups the ante again. So a social worker, in some cases two social workers, in some cases two social workers and a police officer, or one social worker and a police officer, attend at the residence, and they have a conversation with mom to say what's going on. When they arrive, mom has some bruising on her arm, and it's, you can see that it's fingerprints, and the place is pretty messy. There's still some smashed things laying around. Little Johnny's toddling around, and it looks like it's not the best situation right now for little Johnny. Never mind, mom. Never mind, mom. Mom's sidelined. Mom's over here. The focus is on little Johnny. So the social worker makes a determination to remove the child. Little Johnny is picked up, and some belongings are taken. A stuffy or some favorite something of Johnny. Johnny goes into the arms of a complete stranger. Mum is standing there, probably bawling her guts out, if not herself, resorting to some violence to stop her baby from leaving. She's restrained. And the social worker and the child and whoever else attended leave the home. Johnny's gone. Mum is standing there. The shame around the fact that she's just lost her child, that she too was taken into care, and now her child has been. She just can't live with that shame in that moment. So she's not going to her closest friend, her confidant, if she has one, to baby daddy. She's going to use, or she's going to drink, or she's going to self-harm. She is going to do whatever it takes to numb that pain in that moment because there's no support for her. We, the system, we have abandoned her in that moment. We have left her standing there. We haven't called anyone to support her. We haven't asked her what she needs. We've taken her baby and we've walked out that door. So it shouldn't be a surprise. It should not be a surprise to anyone, and certainly not us. You say you can't imagine not having your children. My children would have been handcuffed to me if anybody tried to take them. And I mean that with all sincerity. There was no way that was going to happen to another generation. So then the social worker who removes the child doesn't spend time with the mom. The social worker's immediately changed. So they've apprehended the child. The child's now in care of a stranger. The child doesn't know who they've gone to. Maybe they're going to end up in a kinship care arrangement if there's a family member willing to take the child. But we've already re-traumatized the child by removing, placing them with stranger care. So 2 more incidences of extreme trauma have occurred before that child hopefully gets into a kinship arrangement. And that's the minimum, recognizing that the child experienced trauma even before the apprehension, which is why they've been removed. The thinking is that mom should feel motivated to get her act together, to get her child returned to her. I can't imagine how. I can't imagine the depths of despair. And then what I have witnessed is social workers change all the time. And so the benchmarks change. So if you complete treatment, you can have supervised access. And a lot of times they're unreasonable. If you complete a life skills course, I'm not going to help you get a life skills course. I'm not going to help you get on the list for a treatment center, the wait list for a treatment center that may require you to go to detox, which means that you're on another wait list. And we won't even go down that path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a whole other.
Your mental, that's a whole other journey. So, we're not putting the mental health supports in place. We're not saying, hey, Sarah, do you want to go to a transition house? You're actually, do you realize you're fleeing violence? So where are the supports? We're not wrapping around that mom or that dad or that family. Who's reaching out to dad to say, your child's been removed and you and your partner need to engage in anti-violence programs and receive supports and help. Are you willing? Are you willing? Who in your family would want to stay connected to little Johnny? Is there an auntie, an uncle, a grandparent? Who does little Johnny know? Our expectations are unreasonable. People are already in crisis. It's not just the child who needs protection. It's the family that needs prevention.
So when you're speaking to me, you're talking about support rather than judgment. And I think it's so easy for the outsider to look on a situation like this, not recognizing that, there might be some severe generational trauma that the mother hasn't had supports to work through. And then it's just, you're coming at this from a place of, like you said, really unreasonable expectations, goalposts that are constantly moving. Like, how can anybody succeed in that kind of a system?
And our risk tolerance, right? Risk tolerance. The risk tolerance in the ministry is very, very low because they come under scrutiny. They never are in the news for doing something amazing. And they do amazing things at times, but they're always in the news for tragedies. So the risk tolerance is not there.
What do you mean by risk tolerance?
If I was queen of the world, I would have gone in to Johnny's house, and I would have said to Mom, let's chat. And while we chat, we're going to clean up. We're going to pick up all the broken pieces. We're going to make sure Johnny's had something to eat recently. We're going to make sure his diaper's clean and he's had, if he needs a bath, we give him a bath together. Like, let's talk about what's really going on in this home. Let's talk about Dad. Let's talk about the relationship. Let's talk about what her part is in what broke down during the most recent argument and the arguments before that. That is wraparound support. That is going into the home and talking about what is truly going on in this environment, as opposed to making those instant judgments. Now, if I had decided to leave Johnny, that elevates the risk. So I've given Mom a safety plan. We've worked through a safety plan, which means she has a code to text her best friend or her mom, a code that says cookies. And that means things have escalated. Dad's returned to the house. She needs help. Like, we put some safety measures in place. I'm now taking a risk. I'm taking a risk by that decision to trust that Mom is going to use those safety measures if she finds herself in trouble. She might not. And that may place Johnny at further risk. That's what I mean by the ministry's risk tolerance. They will remove as opposed to facing that risk.
So what happens if you've got, a mother who, and I mean, I've seen this in the recovery community where, you've got somebody that has had every support given to them and surrounded by family that loves them, surrounded by family that maybe are bordering on codependency and like enabling. What does that look like for the safety of a child?
So you're talking now, we're going from a first intervention, right? Fighting, things being smashed, and you're going to Z. So Mom's been given, Dad's been given multiple chances. They're involved in substance use. They're not willing to accept help. They're not showing up for supervised visits. That's a very, very different story. And how many times should a child have to wait and experience Mom and or Dad not showing up for those visits? How many times should they have to be subjected to those behaviors if Mom and Dad aren't willing to accept help? That is a very, very different story, and one that I truly believe could have been helped way upstream, way further up the river, if supports, appropriate supports, family-led appropriate supports, build the circle around that family so that there is accountability, so that Grandma knows that if Mom didn't show up for daycare, Grandma knows what to do. Bring that family in. It doesn't always have to be paid supports. And in most circumstances, the best support is from those that love and care for and sometimes enable the individual. But that's a very different story. And the protection of the child has to be paramount. Has to be paramount.
Yeah.
Very complex.
Very complex. Very and requires a tremendous amount of compassion. How do you respond to, the people that just think like that go at these situations with just judgment and quick fixes and not compassion and understanding towards these people in these really difficult situations?
People go on the defensive. It's okay. It's totally okay. At least there's conversation. I don't have all the answers and I don't need to be right. I just want people to be aware and have conversations around what could better look like. We need to turn our own pain into purpose. That's what drives us, is taking our pain or our passion and turning it into purpose. And not everybody's purpose is going to be child welfare. That's okay. But I do want people to be aware. I want people to know if they're living next door to a kid that's been severely traumatized who might come and sit down at the dinner table and drop F-bombs. That happened in my house when my kids were young, right? And we had to have conversations with friends and say, hey, buddy, we don't talk like that at our table. And buddy would say, why do you sit at the table and eat dinner? and and have those conversations. If we don't have compassion for each other, um, it would be, maybe it is a terrifying world.
So a lot of these children that go into care, what is the goal for them for reunification with the family, and does that happen? Like, are a lot of these kids aging out of care? Because I know that that's not a good thing either.
Yeah, so the majority of investigations are closed and no action required. The majority of complaints, it may not even require an investigation. Um, so the majority of them are closed. The path when a child is removed is always reunification. Always. There's going to be circumstances. We've had both parents, professional individuals, go out on a date night and die of drug overdoses
Hmm.
in BC. So that child is automatically in need of protection. You can't come back from that as mom and dad, right? So there are situations where a child is always going to be in need of of protection, and that circle. Who's in that child's circle? Um, I think that we get really lost in the politics and the complexities when we simply need to think about what is in the best interest of this child. What does this child need? We haven't even touched on sibling groups, right? Um, and what's in the best interest of sibling groups. So there are many considerations, many complexities, and many opportunities
Hmm.
to support children, youth, and families.
Are you able to talk about the children coming to school dirty?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, I have two favorite stories. The other one's about chicken. Um, this one is about a First Nations community where there was limited water, and the kids, a sibling group, were going to school, two girls and a boy, were going to school, and their clothes were dirty. They were wearing the same clothes. Personal hygiene was a problem. The school was really worried about the situation and made a call to the ministry. The social worker, the next time they were in the community, went by and talked with mom, single mom in the home. Single mom, her hygiene wasn't great either. It wasn't like it was neglecting the children. There was clearly an issue there. And mom was proud. So the social worker had to work at the conversation and ask questions that were relevant, not about what are you doing wrong? Why aren't you caring for your kids? Questions about what does life look like this far in the north? Like, how do you get to the store? Like, I've never experienced this way of living, and I'm so interested. Tell me how. Um, and the social worker did that. Really great case of practice. And what came out was they had a cistern, and a cistern pumps the water into the home. And the cistern broke, and it was it was thousands of dollars. And mom was on benefits. She was staying at home with her children. And the social worker broke some rules and paid to get the cistern replaced. Those kids got to stay with mom, and they got clean laundry, and they got to take showers, and they never had to come into the care of the ministry and be removed from the community because that social worker thought about the cistern and asked the right questions.
I love that story. I mean, it just seems so, makes so much sense. Yet what I'm hearing you say is that we've got to think outside of the box, but it's not really
Yes,
even thinking outside of the box. It's just kind of like logical thinking, common sense, right? But when you've got this system that says this is the protocol, it doesn't allow for common sense. Is that what you're saying?
that's what I'm saying, 100%. And what I'm going to take you back to is that risk piece, right?
Yeah.
That risk piece. So a social worker is breaking rules or going outside of policy and fixing a cistern. That social worker knows nothing about cisterns. I don't know anything about cisterns, but I'd have done the same thing, right? That takes guts because in a system you're oppressed. You've got to follow the policy and make sure everybody is treated the same with all the complexities that we've talked about. It's impossible. You can't treat everybody the same. You have to be willing to take a risk and meet the needs of the family where they are at. But I've heard it over and over again in practice. We want to know, is it black or is it white? Do we check what are the boxes we have to check? And we can't be gray. Don't tell us we can be gray because that involves risk. Family preservation should always be top priority if you are up the river. You're at the beginning. I don't know if you've ever read the Don't Look Away report by the Representative for Children and Youth.
No, I haven't.
Make sure you have a box of Kleenex, a glass of water, and take a few days to read it. There are situations where children need to be removed. They are absolutely situations where children need to be removed. And again, it should have happened much, much, much earlier. Tragic situations. I believed, and I know I'm taking us down a little bit of a different path, I believed that report, Don't Look Away, would bring this province to its knees. We had to provide mental health supports for my staff after reading that report. And it didn't bring this province to its knees because these kids are invisible and people are not aware. Anybody wants to know what drives me to go to social media and to use my voice and to talk truth? Read that report. Just take care of yourself when you do.
I'd like to talk a little bit about that Instagram page you sent me where we are parading kids in foster care to be adopted.
Yes, in the US. Yes.
Yeah. Is there anywhere else you want to go before
I'm happy. I'm happy to go there.
Okay.
I'm happy to go there.
I'm talking about a page where they feature a child in foster care who is needing to be adopted. And I say that carefully because are they needing, like, do all children in foster care need to actually be adopted, or can we do guardianship? Like, can we do kinship adoption? Before we go there, let me go here first, if that's okay. There's a lot of hopeful adoptive parents, and in the States, every 45 couples waiting to adopt, there's one infant available. There's a lot of couples that want to be parents, and the baby supply is just simply not there. And then the next option is, do we adopt a child from foster care? But often we hear, well, I don't want a child from foster care because they're damaged. They've got trauma, they've got issues. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are no babies in British Columbia, we'll start with that are in foster care for adoption. None. Zero. No babies. Last year, glasses, there were 147 kids adopted in British Columbia out of care. 66 of them were 12 years of age plus. 60 of them were 5 years above, 5 years and above. And there were 26 sibling groups adopted. So that's 2024 data in BC. So what are my thoughts? My thoughts are that, unfortunately, families aren't given the whole picture. Kids in government care are more and more complex as there are fewer kids in care, which is declining year over year. We're right around 5,000 kids in care right now. And I might add that we have more staff right now in the ministry than kids in care, whole other topic. But there's around 5,000 kids in care. We have approximately between 900 and 1,100 kids age out of care in British Columbia each year. I am absolutely horrified by the page I sent you. We are not up for sale. We adopted people. I prefer the term relinquished. We have all been relinquished. Some more agreeably than others. Some without a full understanding of what relinquishment means. I believe that there is the highest duty to protect a child who has been relinquished. And that includes reunification, if that's possible. That includes significant research into an adopted family. What resources the child needs. What about the truth? Adoptive parents should be told the truth about the complexity of the child that they are inquiring about adopting. Why are we holding information back? Because we want them to be adopted. We want to get them out of care. I have a very harsh belief that always gets me into trouble. And here it is. I would prefer that a child that has been relinquished be placed in what people might call an orphanage, what people might call a staffed resource, over a home that has not been fully apprised of what they are involving themselves in, a home that has not been fully vetted and appropriately vetted, the follow-up that does not happen should be in place. The number of abuse stories that come out of the adoption community is horrific. And the vulnerability of children with disabilities, children that may be unable to verbalize what is happening to them, or they may view what is happening to them, which is inappropriate and abusive, as love. And they don't know any different. The page I sent you, I feel like those children, and I am sure that they are putting themselves out there with consent. But that consent is desperation. Where do I belong? Who loves me? Where do I fit? I'm going to age out and I don't belong anywhere. I don't belong to anyone. Please, I'm funny. I have a wicked sense of humor. I'm artistic. I, they are speaking out about their attributes in a way to attract adoption. I'm not going to say what I'm thinking, but I'm terrified about what that's going to attract. Terrified. These are not puppies or kitty cats or bunny rabbits. These and I'm an animal lover. I'll just put that out there. But these are our children. And again, I don't care if they're British, South African, American, Canadian, they're our children. And they are advertising themselves for adoption. And there's a cute little byline that says, I'll even consider interstate.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's isolate them more. Let's remove them from their community, from their circle of support, should they have one. I want to know who is investing in connecting these kids back to their natural network of support. Who's connecting them to their uncle, who might be a little sketchy and a little rowdy, but he's still their uncle. And maybe he can only commit to seeing them once a month for a lunch. But that's something, that's a connection back. Who's investing in that circle? As opposed to who's investing in getting them off the child welfare list, the adoption list. That costs government money, to have those kids in care. Lots of money. Lots of money. Placements are very, very expensive. So let's market these kids and get them out of adoption. What are people thinking? What are people thinking?
When I saw that page, these children, it's their pictures, and then they do like a little interview, and then there's a caption at the bottom to describe what they're like. It's very reminiscent of the 60s scoop with Indigenous kids being posted in the newspaper saying,
Yeah.
this is a very well behaved child, as normal as possible. They're the
Mm-hmm.
language
Mm-hmm.
that they're using
Mm-hmm.
to, and exactly what you said, to entice adopters and perhaps people with less than good intentions.
I wanted nothing more. I wanted nothing more than to know where and who I belong to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what those kids are seeking. It's written. It's written all over them. It's part of the interview. And that desperation is exploitive.
It is, and it I think it shows their vulnerability, and the wrong people prey on that kind of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
It's so disturbing. Um, uh, yeah, I I don't know who came up with that idea, but it's very upsetting. Gretchen Sisson talks about this, and she's an author. She wrote Relinquished. She talks about wherever adoption has happened, it's because there's been a breakdown in supports somewhere
That's
along
right.
the way.
Prevention.
Yeah.
Prevention.
I know that we jumped around a lot, Catherine, but I'm so grateful for your willingness to come and speak on these things and to bring about awareness about what is going on locally here in British Columbia. Go follow Catherine on her Instagram, TikTok.
My TikTok is CT Cares.
Okay.
CT.cares.
Who_cares in BC. And that is the Instagram page where Catherine talks about the system and things that could use some reform.
Thanks so much, Crystal. It's been great to connect with you. I really appreciate your interest and your passion for this work. it shines through, and your willingness to find out factual information and tackle difficult topics.
Mm.
You and I both know, and I'm sure your listeners do, it comes at a personal cost. And there are times when that cost is high. So thank you for paying that price. I'll walk beside you, and I'll pay it too.
Catherine, thank you for saying that and for acknowledging that. I think our heart is to create awareness and to create change and care for these families as a whole. Thank you for coming and speaking about this so candidly. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Because She's Adopted podcast. You can find us on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Go over and follow us on all the social medias, Crystal Park Official, and we will see you next time.